HOA. Karen blocked the wildfire crew 6 minutes later. I called in an air tanker drop right over her. The sun hung low over Juniper Hills, a gated community perched on a ridge in Northern California, its golden rays slicing through a haze of smoke that clung to the air like a bad memory. I stood on my porch, sweat beading on my forehead, watching the horizon glow an angry orange. The wildfire was close now, too close. Sirens wailed in the distance, and the crackle of radio chatter from the fire crew down the street buzzed like a swarm of bees. My heart pounded, not just from the heat or the threat licking at the hills, but from the absurdity unfolding in front of me. Karen Whitlock, our HOA president, was blocking the wildfire crew's access road with her pearl-white SUV, arms crossed, face twisted in righteous indignation. "You can't park those filthy trucks on our cul-de-sac," she shrieked, her voice piercing the smoky air. "This is a violation of Article 7, Section 3 of the HOA bylaws. No commercial vehicles without prior approval." I gripped the railing, my knuckles whitening. The crew chief, a burly guy named Ramirez with soot streaked across his face, looked like he was 1 second from losing it. His team, clad in yellow Nomex suits, stood behind him, axes and hoses in hand, their eyes darting between Karen and the flames cresting the ridge less than a mile away. The wind was picking up, carrying embers like fireflies, and every second Karen wasted was a second closer to disaster. "Lady," Ramirez said, his voice tight, "we're trying to save your damn houses. Move your car, or I'll have it towed." Karen didn't budge. Her blonde bob was immaculate despite the chaos, and her yoga pants gleamed under the dying sunlight. "Towed? By whom? I'm the president of this association. I decide what happens here." She jabbed a manicured finger at him. "You're trespassing, and I'm calling the sheriff." I couldn't take it anymore. I jogged down my driveway, my boots crunching on the gravel, and shouted, "Karen, are you out of your mind? There's a wildfire coming. Let them through." She spun toward me, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, of course it's you, Jake. Always stirring up trouble. These people need to follow protocol. If we let every Tom, Dick, and Harry park wherever they want, this community will turn into a slum." A murmur rippled through the neighbors who'd gathered on their lawns, clutching phones and garden hoses like they could fend off a 50-foot wall of flame. Some nodded at Karen's words, her iron grip on the HOA had brainwashed half the block into thinking her word was law. Others, like Mrs. Chun next door, looked ready to throttle her. I caught Ramirez's eye, and he gave me a subtle nod, like he was saying, "Handle this, or I will." "Karen," I said, forcing calm into my voice, "if you don't move, we're all gonna lose everything. My house, your house, the whole damn neighborhood. You want that on your conscience?" She scoffed, tossing her head. "Don't be dramatic, Jake. The fire's miles away. They'll handle it from the highway. I'm protecting our property values." That's when I heard a low, guttural roar, like a freight train barreling down the valley. The wind shifted, and the smoke thickened, stinging my eyes. The fire was moving faster than anyone expected. Ramirez's radio crackled, and a voice barked, "Evacuation order, Juniper Hills. Mandatory. Now." The crew didn't wait for Karen's permission. They started unloading gear, hauling hoses toward the ridge, but their tanker truck, the one with thousands of gallons of water, was still stuck behind her SUV. Ramirez shouted orders, but his eyes kept flicking to the flames, now visible through the trees. I could feel the heat on my face, a dry, suffocating promise of what was coming. "Jake," a voice called from behind me. I turned to see Ellie, my 16-year-old daughter, sprinting across the lawn, her backpack bouncing. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Dad, we gotta go? The news says the fire's jumping the river." "Get back to the house," I told her, my voice sharper than I meant. "Pack the car. Essentials only." She hesitated, glancing at Karen, who was now on her phone, yelling about unauthorized personnel. Ellie's jaw tightened. "She's gonna get us all killed," she muttered, then ran back toward the house. I turned back to Karen, my patience gone. "Move the damn car, or I'll move it myself." She gasped, clutching her phone like a shield. "You wouldn't dare? That's vandalism. I'll sue you into oblivion." That's when the twist came, not from Karen, but from an unexpected ally. Old Man Carver, the 80-year-old recluse who lived at the end of the street, shuffled forward, leaning on his cane. Nobody ever saw him outside his house. He was practically a ghost, known only for his overgrown lawn that drove Karen nuts. His voice was gravelly, barely audible over the wind, but it carried a weight that silenced everyone. "Karen," he said, "you're a fool. My wife died in the '87 fire, 'cause people like you got in the way. Move your car, or I'll ram it with my tractor." The crowd froze. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for air. Carver's eyes, cloudy with age, burned with a ferocity I'd never seen. I didn't know if he was bluffing about the tractor, but the raw pain in his voice was real. For the first time, Karen looked uncertain, her bravado cracking. Before she could respond, a deafening whoosh echoed through the valley. A fireball erupted on the ridge, swallowing a stand of pines in seconds. Screams broke out among the neighbors. Ramirez cursed and grabbed his radio. "Command, this is Unit 12. We're blocked at Juniper Hills. Need air support now." Karen's face paled, but she still didn't move. I'd had enough. I sprinted to my garage, grabbed a crowbar, and stormed toward her SUV. "Last chance," I said, raising the bar. "You're insane," she shrieked, but she fumbled for her keys, her hands shaking. She unlocked the car and peeled out, nearly clipping Ramirez as she sped down the street. The crew surged forward, dragging hoses and shouting coordinates into their radios. I ran back to my house, where Ellie was throwing photo albums and our dog's leash into the car. "Dad, what's happening?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We're getting out," I said, grabbing my phone. But as I dialed 911 to confirm the evacuation route, I overheard Ramirez on his radio, his voice grim. "Air tankers 6 minutes out. Drop zone's the ridge, but it's gonna be tight." 6 minutes. I looked at the fire, now a wall of orange devouring the hillside, and my stomach dropped. The air tanker was our last hope, but it was a blunt instrument, thousands of gallons of retardant dumped from the sky. No precision, no mercy. And Karen's house, with its manicured lawn and tacky fountain, sat right at the edge of the drop zone. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not yet. Ellie and I loaded the car, but as we pulled out, I saw Karen's SUV parked haphazardly in her driveway, blocking 2 other neighbors' cars. She was inside her house, screaming into her phone, oblivious to the inferno bearing down. The crew was too busy to deal with her, and the sheriff hadn't arrived. I wanted to leave her to her fate, but Ellie grabbed my arm. "Dad, we can't just let her die," she said, her eyes searching mine. I cursed under my breath. She was right, but every fiber of my being screamed to get my kid to safety. "Stay here," I told her, jumping out of the car. I sprinted to Karen's door and pounded on it. "Karen, get out. The fire's here." She flung the door open, her face streaked with mascara. "This is your fault," she wailed. "You and those firefighters ruined everything." I grabbed her arm, dragging her toward my car. "You can sue me later. Move." She fought me, clawing at my hand, but I shoved her into the back seat next to Ellie, who gave her a look that could have melted steel. As I floored the gas, the radio crackled with Ramirez's voice. "Tankers inbound. Clear the drop zone." I glanced in the rearview mirror. The sky was black with smoke, but a low rumble cut through the Cayosa plain, heavy and slow, swooping over the ridge. My heart stopped. Karen's house was directly in the path. "Dad, what's that?" Ellie asked, craning her neck. "Air tanker," I said, my voice hollow. "They're dropping retardant." Karen screamed, twisting in her seat. "My house. They can't do this. I'll sue the county. I'll—" Her words were drowned out by a deafening roar as the tanker unleashed its payload. A crimson wave of fire retardant cascaded over the ridge, coating Karen's house, her SUV, her precious fountain, everything in a sticky, chemical sludge. The fire hissed and sputtered where the retardant hit, but the flames kept coming, relentless. Karen collapsed against the seat, sobbing. Ellie stared out the window, her face unreadable. I kept driving, my hands shaking on the wheel, trying to focus on the evacuation route. But a bitter thought wormed its way into my mind. She deserved it. Or so I thought. The road out of Juniper Hills was a snarl of panicked cars, their headlights cutting through the smoke like knives. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, as Ellie sat rigid in the passenger seat, her hands clutching our dog's leash. In the back seat, Karen Whitlock wailed, her voice a jagged edge that grated against the hum of the engine. "My house. My life. It's all ruined, she sobbed, her mascara-streaked face buried in her hands. The image of her pristine SUV and manicured lawn drowned in crimson fire retardant was seared into my mind, and I couldn't shake the grim satisfaction it brought. But Ellie's quiet voice cut through my thoughts. "Dad," she said, barely audible. "Is she going to be okay?" I glanced at her, my 16-year-old daughter, whose eyes held a mix of fear and compassion I didn't deserve. "She's alive," I said, my tone harder than I meant. "That's more than she'd have been if we left her." Karen's sobs hitched, and she snapped. "You think you're a hero, Jake? You called that tanker. You destroyed everything I worked for." I slammed on the brakes as a deer darted across the road, the jolt silencing her for a moment. "I didn't call the tanker," I said, my voice low. "Ramirez did. And if he hadn't, your house would be ash right now, along with the rest of the neighborhood." She didn't respond, just slumped back, her fight drained. The truth was, I'd been ready to let her face the consequences of her stupidity. If Ellie hadn't spoken up, I might have driven away without a second thought. That realization sat heavy in my chest, a cold weight I couldn't shake. The evacuation route led us to a high school gymnasium in the next town, now a makeshift shelter. Red Cross volunteers handed out water and blankets, their faces strained but kind. Ellie stuck close to me, her backpack slung over one shoulder, while Karen wandered off, muttering about lawyers and insurance. I found Ramirez outside, leaning against his truck, his face etched with exhaustion. "You did good back there," he said, offering a tired nod. "Most people would have let her burn." I shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "My kid made me do it." He chuckled, a dry sound. "Kids have a way of keeping us honest. Fire's still moving, but the tanker drop bought us time. Might save half the houses." "Might?" I asked, my stomach twisting. He met my eyes, his gaze steady. "It's a bad one, Jake. Worst I've seen in years." I nodded, the weight of his words settling in. Ellie tugged my sleeve, pointing to a TV in the shelter's corner, where a news anchor's voice droned over footage of the fire. "Juniper Hills is under siege tonight as the blaze, fueled by record drought, threatens hundreds of homes." The screen showed aerial shots of the ridge, flames devouring trees, and Karen's house, a red-stained speck in the chaos. I turned away, unable to watch. The next hours blurred into a haze of waiting and dread. Ellie dozed on a cot, our dog curled beside her, while I paced, checking my phone for updates. Texts from neighbors trickled in. Some had lost everything. Others were still hoping. Mrs. Chin sent a photo of her garden, now ash, with a single emoji, a broken heart. I tried to reply but couldn't find the words. Around midnight, Karen reappeared, her yoga pants wrinkled, her bob a mess. She clutched a styrofoam cup of coffee, her eyes red but sharp. "Jake," she said, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard. "I need to talk to you." I braced myself for another tirade, but she sat across from me, her hands trembling. "I didn't know it was that bad," she said. "I thought I was protecting the neighborhood. The rules, the order, it's all I had." I stared at her, caught off guard. Karen, the tyrant of Juniper Hills, was unraveling before me. "You almost got us killed," I said, unable to soften the truth. She flinched, then nodded. "I know. I'm sorry. I couldn't let go." I didn't know what to say. Her apology felt like a pebble tossed into a raging river, too small, too late. But before I could respond, a new voice interrupted. "Karen, is that you?" A woman approached, her face weathered, her clothes smelling faintly of smoke. She was in her 60s, with a limp and a fierce glint in her eyes. I didn't recognize her, but Karen's face drained of color. "Marla," Karen whispered, her coffee cup slipping from her hands and hitting the floor. The woman Marla crossed her arms. "Didn't think I'd see you again after you ran me out of Juniper Hills." Ellie stirred on her cot, waking just enough to watch, her eyes wide. I leaned forward, sensing a story I hadn't heard. Karen stammered, "I didn't run you out. You left." Marla laughed, a bitter sound. "Sure. After you got the HOA to fine me into bankruptcy over my non-compliant mailbox. You wanted me gone because I called you out for bullying everyone. And now look at you, crying over your house when you blocked the damn fire crew." The shelter went quiet, heads turning toward us. Karen shrank in her seat, her face a mask of shame. I pieced it together. Marla was the twist, a ghost from Karen's past, here to expose her for who she'd always been. But Marla wasn't done. I was a volunteer firefighter back then, she said, her voice cutting like a blade. I begged you to let us train in Juniper Hills, to clear the brush, but you said it'd ruin the aesthetic. If you'd listened, maybe this fire wouldn't have gotten so close. The words landed like a punch. Karen's obsession with control hadn't just endangered us today, it had set the stage for disaster years ago. I glanced at Ellie, who was sitting up now, her jaw tight. She'd always hated Karen's petty rules, but this was different. This was betrayal. Karen's voice broke. I didn't know I thought I was doing the right thing. Marla shook her head. You never think about anyone but yourself. And now we're all paying for it. She walked away, leaving Karen staring at the spilled coffee on the floor. I wanted to feel vindicated, but all I felt was hollow. Juniper Hills wasn't just a place, it was people, families, memories. And Karen's actions had put it all at risk. Dawn broke, gray and heavy with smoke. Ramirez came back with news. The fire was 40% contained, but Juniper Hills was a patchwork of destruction. My house was still standing, barely, but Karen's was gone, the retardant no match for the flames that followed. Half the neighborhood was ash. We drove back to survey the damage, Ellie silent beside me, Karen in the back seat like a ghost. The air was thick with the smell of charred wood and chemicals. Our street was unrecognizable, Mrs. Chin's garden was a black scar, Carver's house a smoldering ruin. My throat tightened as I saw my own home, its roof scorched but intact. I hugged Ellie, grateful for what we hadn't lost. Karen got out, staring at the pile of rubble that had been her house. Her fountain, once her pride, was a twisted wreck. She didn't cry, didn't speak, just stood there, alone. Ellie tugged my sleeve. Dad, should we do something? I looked at Karen, a woman I'd despised for years, now broken by her own choices. I wanted to walk away, to let her drown in her regret. But Ellie's words from the night before echoed in my head. We can't just let her die. Karen, I called, my voice rough. She turned, her eyes empty. You got anywhere to go? She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. No. I sighed, hating myself for what I was about to say. You can stay with us. Just for a bit. Ellie's eyes widened, but she didn't argue. Karen stared at me, then nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. Thank you, she said, so softly I almost missed it. As we drove away, the weight of the fire's toll settled in. Juniper Hills would never be the same. Carver was gone, his tractor hadn't saved him. Mrs. Chun was moving to live with her son. And Karen, the woman who'd ruled us with an iron fist, was now a guest in my home. A reminder of how thin the line was between order and chaos. The twist wasn't just Marla's revelation, it was the bitter truth that Karen wasn't the only one who'd failed. I'd judged her, hated her, but I'd also stood by while she terrorized the neighborhood, too busy with my own life to challenge her. We'd all let Juniper Hills become a tinderbox, and now we were picking up the pieces. The ending wasn't justice, not really. Karen lost everything, but so did others, people who didn't deserve it. And as I looked at Ellie, her face older than her years, I knew the fire had changed us all. We'd survived, but at a cost that would linger long after the smoke cleared. What do you think? Was Karen's fate deserved, or did she deserve a chance at redemption? Should Jake have left her to face the consequences, or was saving her the right call? Share your thoughts. There's no right answer, only the messy truth of human choices.